Hello? Welcome to the very first and probably last episode of Without Your Knowledge, a podcast about phone conversations where the phone caller is being recorded without their knowledge that they're being recorded. Candid conversations about maybe just about anything. In this case, the gaming industry, trends with hype versus hope, Watch Dogs, Mr. Robot, and other thoughts from Todd. Enjoy. So, why haven't you been sleeping?
I don't know. I can't sleep. It's not for the lack of trying, right? I get in bed and then I just can't sleep. So I ended up watching a bunch of stuff. Did I tell you that I was watching Mr. Robot?
Yeah, we talked last time at how amazed I was that you hadn't seen it yet.
Okay, I finished watching it yesterday, and wow, that is some good television. And one thing after I finished watching it is that this is something that I was really hoping Watch Dogs was going to deliver. You know, this level of depth and this rabbit hole down the obscure and things you're not supposed to do, and then it doesn't, right? It makes me think, it made me sad. Not sad, but it made me so disappointed in the thought that, wow, Ubisoft really, really, more than The Division, dropped the ball with this game because there was so much potential, so much storytelling potential, and what it ended up being was a GTA clone with a hacking gimmick through a phone. You know, and the reason why I said why I had mentioned to you about Mr. Robot previously before I started.
Hello? Todd? Todd, did your phone cut off? Hello? Earth to Todd? Hello?
Yeah, I'm gonna hack my phone.
You what?
I'm gonna hack my phone.
Someone hacked your phone?
Yep, someone hacked my phone. I mean, Martha, it's just a joke.
What?
The joke.
Oh.
Terrible joke.
Well, that's what I was surprised about. I was saying to myself, how can someone have hacked his phone? He was literally just talking about Watch Dogs. That has to be the worst ironic situation to happen.
Right, that'd be funny. Actually, no, that'd be terrifying. But what was the last thing you heard me say? I was talking about Watch Dogs. Okay, so the reason why I had mentioned Mr. Robot in the first place before I watched it, because people in the press were comparing Watch Dogs to, not comparing it, but they were saying that it had this Mr. Robot vibe. And then that's why I started watching the show. But then I realize it, and then I think about it, and then I look at the footage, and then I look at the footage of the first game, and I don't think that vibe is not there. Because Mr. Robot isn't trying to glorify hacking. It's talking about the intricacies about it and how the world interprets it the wrong way, and obviously about Elliot's emotional kind of state and his social disorder. I don't think that Ubisoft has that kind of writing skill to write anything even nearly remote. You know, and that's unfortunate. Because I would like to play the game where you play the hacker. That'd be pretty cool, but that's not gonna happen. So yeah, but either way, the show is really good, and I want to find that soundtrack and download it, because that soundtrack is not something that I can listen to while I'm working on stuff.
I think that it's interesting that most people would compare the show to the game, and I think it's mainly based off of just surface level.
Yeah.
I think that my assumption is that whoever made that comparison might have seen the show and then in passing seen the game or not played the game. I don't know how many people might have played and seen the show also to make that judgment call, but yeah, I can see where they led in with that, but at a deeper level, I don't think I would quite agree.
No, I definitely agree to your point there, and you know, when you think about games that do reach that kind of level of depth and study of the human condition, which is really the most interesting part of games. I think there are very few that actually do that successfully. But it would be cool to see somebody, not Ubisoft, right, try to tackle this on a more serious level. Because I was watching some Watch Dogs gameplay late last night, early this morning, after I finished the show, and it's it's very like you said, it's very surface level stuff, and it's like stereotypical. It's it tries to hide it, but it's like, well, no, you're not. Like, this is basically how people have interpreted hackers since like the late '80s, right, or the early '90s. Just look at the movie Hackers. While Hackers is a campy movie, it's probably the most insulting. More so probably than Watch Dogs, but I don't know. Like, I would love to see somebody try to do something along the lines of something like that. That would be kind of incredible, and it'd be so interesting, like playing in this open world, and you're like this low level, computer engineer, hacker, whatever, and you're kind of like building your way up to the top, or maybe not, maybe something a little less. That'd be fascinating. I don't know, of course, who would be able to write that kind of stuff, but it is kind of sad. And yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe the people, and I saw multiple people talk about this and draw those comparisons. And yeah, you're right. Maybe they didn't actually. Maybe they saw the show before they played the game. They didn't play the game at all, right? So that's some concern.
So that kind of brings an interesting question. If you were to remake Watch Dogs, because you said earlier Watch Dogs is like a GTA clone. If you were to remake Watch Dogs in any sort of genre or style, or I guess with varying mechanics, or compare it to another game, which one or which ones, like if you had to chimera a couple together, would you really take it after to get the maximum effect?
So this is the thing. I do like the open world setting, and that would probably be
Ladies and gentlemen, Todd is going to continue to tell us his response. But I just want you to know that the bells that you hear in the background, that is St. James Episcopal Church. It is currently 6 o'clock on the Eastern Seaboard. And now, back to Todd.
Like someone's talking to Elliot, and he's trying to figure out what he's going to say next. Their voice will fade out, and he'll narrate. Like, he'll talk about other stuff. He's like, "Oh, what am I going to tell Angie? Should I tell her this? Should I tell her that? Should I light her? Should I tell her what she wants to hear? How do I get away from this situation, this conversation?" And I think that a dialogue tree would be great. Again, the open world setting, I think, makes a lot of sense. But this is the thing. Watch Dogs, and I watched like maybe half an hour of gameplay. It's still a third-person shooter. It is a third-person shooter. Now, the thing that I realized is that the hacking mechanics gimmick of the game, it looks like it could be fun, right? And in the gameplay that I saw, this girl was trying to play a certain like combat scenario stealth, like hacking his way into this facility without actually shooting anybody. But I think the game makes it kind of impossible to really do that effectively, just because they encourage you to take out the gun, because there has to be guns, and that's okay, right? Because the world of Mr. Robot and of Watch Dogs is a dangerous world, right? Like, these people are taking down corporations, blah, 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 who are dangerous, and they themselves are dangerous because they're doing something illegal, therefore they're going to be militant or radical. And that's interesting to me. But I would downplay, like, I need to resort to, the last resort is the gun in my back pocket, right? In Mr. Robot, there are definitely some really intense situations where a gun is present, but that's kind of like the last resort kind of thing, right? Elliot uses manipulation and obviously hacking prowess to get out of the situation or come to a conclusion. So I think that make a character in a world where he or she doesn't necessarily have a gun, and he has to rely on these other things, and like a gun would be a very last resort kind of thing, and and ammunition would be extremely sparse, and it'd be the kind of thing where the player character, like kind of like how Far Cry 3 started, where the character was not a combatant. He was just this college kid on vacation in the wrong spot at the wrong time, and he had to kind of learn his way into this is how he use a gun. No matter albeit brief, but it'd be cool if that was the idea. So this is the thing. I think that also looking at Watch Dogs, the world looks very barren and very boring and extremely mediocre compared to GTA 5's Los Santos city, because that city is thriving and full of life, and things are happening around the city even when you're not there, right? And I think that if you're going to make a hacker game like that, you have to put it in a big city, and it has to be full of life. There has to be things happening there to make it seem as if like what you're doing is actually affecting people or not, And I think that's I would take away stuff from like Mass Effect or The Witcher, where what you do does actually have consequences. The decisions you make, the things you say, or the hacking situations that you choose to be a part of or not, that needs to take a real effect on the world. So like GTA 5 has an economy, has a stock market, and this economy system where you can buy stocks in certain companies, and obviously in GTA it's not actually that deep, like to prevent your competitors' stocks from rising. You go and shoot them place up, right? So it's very singular like that. But the idea is there. Like there's even a separate economy system for the online mode, right? Which basically tells players to be encourages more involvement. And I think that since a lot of what's happening in Mr. Robot does entail the world and the U.S. economy, it's not even a meta, like an important part of the game that you maybe not necessarily have to monitor but be aware of. So say for example your character, you actually go out and buy clothes or supplies that you need or computer parts. That'd be cool. Depending on what happens and with the things that you do, if prices will actually fluctuate and stuff like that. I think a strong economy system would work. Well, and it would definitely turn players off of having to deal with so many systems. At that point, it would turn into a game like a Fallout or like a Witcher, where management of all these systems is part of the game, and it's not necessarily meant for every single person. It's something that takes time. It doesn't respect your time, but it'll be probably really rewarding and satisfying if you sink some time into it and dedicate some brain power into how I'm going to manage all of these things. So, I mean, Deus Ex, Mass Effect, Witcher, the GTA open world setting is cool, but Watch Dogs is interesting because it's very clearly trying to be a GTA, because you can still get into a car, you can still run over civilians, right? It seems so out of place in the world that they're trying to create with that game. In the end, I guess I can say that for the original vision of the game, it was ambitious, right? And they obviously didn't come through with that. I think that would be. I would love to see someone explore this kind of setting. So, like I've said I've been talking about Rockstar a lot recently. I would like them to tackle this. But the thing is, Rockstar, no matter how interesting a lot of their games are and successful, in the end, Rockstar's games are shooters. Like even Red Dead is an incredible game, still a shooter, right? And they don't make games that are not necessarily shooters, because even Eleanor is a shooter technically. Bully is probably the closest thing that comes to not being a shooter, but they're still you still can pick up water guns and all these toy guns and stuff here, like slingshots and stuff, right? It's a mischievous kind of game about a kid in high school. I don't know who I'd want somebody with an incredible narrative pedigree to write this, but I would want the guys from Rockstar to build the world. I think that's probably the best way that I can put that.
So you kind of likened it all to, I guess, AAA or larger, maybe AA games. If Watch Dogs had to be an indie game, what developer do you think would best tackle that?
Oh, man, that's a good one. You know what? That's probably way too obtuse.
Because to be honest, I would probably go with something that's a little Hotline Miami-ish. I would go with Devolver.
Okay, yeah, Yeah, but do you think they can make? Because I would want the game to be serious. Like, do you think they can make a serious kind of game like that?
I don't know. I like their narrative. I like how they do narrative.
I guess if it has to be not in the AAA kind of fantasy world of massive 3D open world game with very impressive graphics and a load of variety in terms of like the things you can do, I would probably say maybe the guys from Kentucky Route Zero.
That's a good choice.
Because, and again, like the narrative structure of Kentucky Route Zero is so strange. Like it's very vague when you talk to characters in that game. And a lot of times recently not recently, but like in the past that I played it, it's very, I have to think about what people say, or like the dialogue 3 or 4 times, because it's very weird. But I think that they can pull something off like that, because like, again, looking at Mr. Robot, in a lot of ways, a lot of things that Elliot tells himself, or things that other characters say to him, is really vague and like ambiguous. So maybe that's better than being straightforward. And it's funny because when I was watching the Watch Dogs stuff, the dialogue is bad. Like that character, Aiden Peters, I complain about Kratos being an tough character. Kratos is probably more interesting than this guy, just because. I mean, actually, the fact that I hear his name, he's the most unlikable, just like faceless character. One of the most generic characters I've seen in a AAA game in a very long time. Like even the soldier you play in Call of Duty is more interesting than this guy. Like, wow, they really dropped the ball, and that's because Ubisoft is actually okay at creating characters, right? Like I think that a lot of the assassins have been really interesting, with an exception of Connor or the dude from Unity. Some of the characters are really interesting, and they're complex. Like Althea is a very complex character with like this really like weird past. They just didn't nail it with this game. And while I could care less about the second game, I really hope that they can deliver with that second game, right? Because I'm still in love with the idea and the premise and the concept of their initial of that game. Yeah, I guess the guys from Kentucky Route Zero would be an interesting choice. I don't know. There's so many indie devs. I wouldn't even know where else. I don't know, dude. That's a hard one. If anything, going back to like AAA stuff, I would love to see Arcane tackle this kind of thing. But they do first person shooter stuff, right? So I wouldn't want this game to be in first person. I want it to be a third person. And I wouldn't mind if it was episodic. Like, I'd rather have this, connected one singular world, but episodic could be kind of cool. You know what? Even though I'm really tired of Telltale's kind of formula, I think if they did a game about a hacker, a really serious kind of game about a hacker, that'd be really interesting. But that's probably not that's not their vibe. That's not the kind of thing they do. They don't do real stuff. They just take existing properties and make stories about them.
I am actually a 0% fan of episodic items. I don't think there's ever been a moment where I've been a fan of anything done episodically.
Oh man, okay, yeah, I understand that though, because you have to wait for the second episode and you're so disconnected from it. That's why a lot of times you want to play any of that stuff, wait for the full season to end, right? I think the one game that I really enjoyed, like I like Life is Strange, but not enough to say that I think it's awesome. The only game I've enjoyed in episode format is probably going to be The Wolf Among Us, just because the character creation and the world that they built is so fascinating and deep and rich, full of history. So that's the only reason I played that game. Also, I played that game. I waited till the end because I forgot who got me a copy of that for Christmas years ago, and I played it that night in like 3 sittings. That was awesome. But I understand you. Actually, Ellie Noir kind of does something really interesting with the episodic format because because each case is considered an episode. But that's a full game that's released in full, right? So would you mind if it was something like that? Because it doesn't disconnect you at all from the story. It's just like, oh well, Cole is on this next case, and it's like 3 days later or something in the world of Los Angeles. Which I thought was interesting. Like I said, really interesting take on how to do the episodic format. Alan Wake is episodic, actually.
Is it?
I mean, yeah, but it doesn't disconnect you from anything. I don't know, actually, it kind of doesn't make any sense that it's an episodic format because, like, when these episodes start, the moment it ends, it leaves you on, like, a cliffhanger, but then it starts again in the second episode, so it continues. Because the thing is, the explanation that Sam Lake and the team had, they wanted to turn it into, like, the X-Files, you know, like, the Twilight Zone kind of style game, and I think they succeeded that. But yeah, that game doesn't disconnect you from the story or the narrative at all. And also, the game was released in full; it wasn't released episodically. It's just structured that way. It doesn't disconnect you from it. Don't let that discourage you from ever playing it if you decide to at some point, because it doesn't feel episodic, but it's clearly set up that way because it has a previously on Alan Wake kind of thing before we start each episode.
I think the less discouraging feature about playing Alan Wake is less on the episodic part and more on the part of I need to get a Microsoft system to play it.
Oh, well, I mean, it's on PC now.
Yeah.
You're right, yeah. If you want no hassle, then you can get an Xbox to play it. Actually, I asked Val to lend me her unused 360 because I wanted to, like, play a couple things. And I totally forgot that I have the copy you guys gave me. So I'm gonna pop that in, I don't know, like next weekend or something. Because I never actually got to finish the DLC for it, and so yeah, looking forward to that. But Watch Dogs, this robot. I hope they can do something interesting with that second game. But I'm already so, we talked about this before. I'm already so turned off because of that secondary character, which I hope it dies immediately when you start playing the game with the stupid horse mask and the emoji eyes. Oh God, that's probably, I can imagine real hackers looking at this and just like either being insulted or like just laughing hysterically at how dumb it is. One can hope for something a little more serious, but I don't think from Ubisoft that's going to happen.
Well, speaking of hoping for something good to happen, we all hoped that Watch Dogs was going to be a good thing. I remember watching the trailer, the very, very first one, before it even showed any gameplay or even footage of what the game looked like. But it had that, really cool cinematic, like, hacking statistics and back and forth and the world's watching you kind of bullshit. But it was cool. It really enraptured me. And then I remember working at GameStop and selling all those Aiden Pierce posters, and there was just a lot of hype around it. There was a lot of hope, more than hype, I would say. A lot of hope that it was going to be a really good game. Something else that's coming up very soon, in about 2 months, on the 9th, is No Man's Sky.
Yeah.
And that's got, I think, to me, equal levels of hope rather than hype. I would say hope, mainly because there was a point in which I wanted desperately, I think, inside, for Watch Dogs to be a thing that would succeed and do well and kind of really fit in a place that I didn't even know was missing with inside my experience in gaming. And I think that a lot of people are, in my perspective, seeing No Man's Sky to be that same kind of missing block that they can place inside their experience. The reason why I say hope instead of hype is because hype for me really speaks to more of a, like, Call of Duty hype. It's more of like an annualized hype, or like something that's built off of mechanics that, yeah, everybody knows about. Whereas hope, you don't want to see it fail. Like, you really don't want to see, like, you've seen it and you're kind of biting your nails, you're on the edge of your seat, or you go home, but you're left with this little tinge of, like, just a small amount of yearning mixed with anxiety for maybe the developers themselves, being that they're a very small studio, or for what they're trying to accomplish. So I would say that No Man's Sky is coming in with a lot of hope. But given the history that we've seen in the past, are you still confident from where you first started?
Um,
Do you still have hope? Or are you, do you feel it's hype? do you feel that we may get something that we weren't expecting come August 9th? Sorry.
So, this is the thing, like, talking about Ubisoft in general, right? At this point, like, with Ubisoft in particular, I know we're talking about No Man's Sky. With Ubisoft, now that we kind of know their patterns, like, they're going to show a game off, it's going to disappear for a little while, come back, and it'll be, like, this downgraded kind of, they're predictable. You know, the footage of Watch Dogs, they still have towers in there that you have to go up so you can reveal them that are part of the map. Like, it's so dumb. That's so predictable. But I think with the guys behind we're talking about right now, it's a wild card. No Man's Sky is a wild card because we don't know what to expect, because the things that we've seen from that studio before is Joe Danger, which is like this trial-esque kind of excite-like kind of game, right? So this is being very ambitious for that studio. And unfortunately, I think with a lot of studios, while ambition is great, and I'd rather see ambition than recycled mechanics every year, a lot of times it's still 50-50. Like, it's either going to fail or it's going to be great. And if it's somewhere in between, the thing is, this is the thing, if it's somewhere in between, it's not even going to be infamous. It's just going to be the thing that people kind of forget about. Because even bad games are famous or have the infamy, and they continue to exist, and people continue to talk about them. Think of Jupiter Forever or Alien Colonial Marines. I remember those because they're bad, like incredibly bad, like epic levels of bad. But like I said, I think that I don't have. At first, it was hype, right? Because when they first showed it off at the Keighley show, like 2 years ago now, 3 years ago now, maybe, it was, people were so pumped for it, and I definitely really felt that hype. But now, inching closer and closer to the release, and even though they didn't need to have it at E3, the fact that they didn't even show a snippet of it at E3 this year, considering how close you are to its release, it definitely concerns me a little bit. Well, it could be just their kind of weird response to all the dumb, death threats that Sean Murray got because of the game, which is ridiculous. I have hope for the game. I am hoping. I don't want it to fail. I want it to be this thing that it does well for that studio, that does well for Sony, and that hopefully, this is the thing. I think that, and Sammy put it interestingly. If you remember the story that I told you a couple months ago about this one customer that came into the store and asked about if he wanted something different to play, and Sammy told him about No Man's Sky, and he said, that's boring. And he said, let me have the Call of Duty. I kind of hope that if this succeeds, like, I want people to be more open-minded and say, I'm kind of curious about this game and what it offers, right? A different kind of experience, right? And while we've talked about Minecraft a lot recently, you've played it recently on the Vita, it'd be interesting if it hit that kind of Minecraft, even though it's improbable. If it hit that kind of Minecraft level of like success, it could definitely have this amount of curiosity, or like spur curiosity in people. Because I guarantee you, there are people who would have never thought they'd be playing Minecraft and are playing Minecraft, like yourself, right? Like you played Minecraft and you enjoyed it, even though you had some problems with it in the end, right? But still, you spent time in the game, you actually played it.
Right. Well,
I think that
my problem was that it was so goddamn addicting that I was losing the ability to function as a normal human being.
Well, I mean, and I'm not saying I want this game to be that, but I want this game to be this immersive, intoxicating kind of experience that you can't wait to get home to play. So I have hope for the game. Unfortunately, a lot of my hope is dwindling, just because I feel I have this weird feeling in my gut that it's going to turn out to be very mediocre, and that's probably my worst fear for that game. I still have hope, but it is dwindling for No Man's Sky. Am I willing to take this $60 plunge? I mean, I was willing to do it the first time, the second time, and then this year kind of like, it's not $60, it's like $40 now, actually. No, it's $60. That's right. I mean, I've taken chances on worse things before. I bought The Order for $60, enjoyed my experience, I don't think I should spend $50 on it. Maybe this will be one of those cases, but my extreme morbid curiosity and hope for it will probably condemn $60 of mine that will soon belong to Sean Murray. But yeah, it's really hope. But the thing is, you talk about how there is a difference between hope and hype. What is people who have hope and is a blindness to it, is ignorance still a factor? Because I think for hype, it's really a lot of ignorance, and it's like, oh man, I can't wait to play that game. And I say that we all say that all the time, right? But at that moment, it's just like ignorance. A lot of people are so insanely excited for Death Stranding from Kojima, and yet it's like, I don't know how you're excited. You saw a short video, on an engine that hasn't even been picked for the game, of Norman Reedus naked. How does that blow your mind? It doesn't blow my mind.
You mean Norman Reedus's ass does not blow your mind?
No, it does not blow my mind. Some people are even giving it a game of show. It's like, I'm sorry, you can't do that. It's not a game. It's pre-rendered, and I'm no saint when it comes to this. Before I definitely gotten excited about pre-rendered things. I think I've gotten excited about pre-rendered things that are quantifiable, like a new BioShock or something along those lines, right? Or an Uncharted, right? Like that first video of Uncharted that wasn't, it was just a pre-render. It wasn't even gameplay. I was like, fuck yeah, it's gonna be great, But what if it wasn't? What if it actually wasn't? So I think that ignorance plays more, for me at least, it plays more into hype than hope. You know what I mean? What do you think about that? Do you think that correlates with those two terms and those two ideas or philosophies or whatever you want to call them?
I think that they are very entwined. You can't have... I think you start with a little bit of both in your heart. Like, for example, Persona 5. I have a lot of hope that it's going to be good, but my hope is steady because I trust Atlas as a creator of fine games. And so I think that I think we're in good hands. And so I'm more hype than I am hope because I don't need it. I already know what I'm getting myself into and what I'm going to get. And I'm more hype about it. So if anybody talks to me about Persona 5, I'll just go out on the street, rip open my shirt and show them my P5 tattoo that I've branded on my chest. Hope would be more for me, No Man's Sky, because I can see earlier a lot of people getting hyped up about it, and if everything was going smoothly to their timeline of, and this is what's going to happen, and then they inch out with a video about what's going to happen, and then they inch out with a video about, and this is this mechanic, and they inch out with a video, and slowly, you build up with a little bit more of the reason for why this is going to be solid. You don't need as much hope, and you can stick with hype, and it becomes a good, steady foundation. So I think, now that I think about it, there are two sides to hype. There's like that positive, I feel good about it, I can just reach out into the world and exclaim how amazing this is hype, or I can overly hype it and get lost in the in the hype itself and drown myself and be blind to the fact that I should check my hope level. And maybe at some point that's what a lot of people did with Watch Dogs, and then it came out and then they were like, crap, this was overly hyped, when really they just didn't check to see how much they were really hoping it would be good. Because now I'm at this point where I sure fucking hope that No Man's Sky is good. But when I think about why I'm saying that, it brings up another question. What happens if it fails? What happens if it succeeds? When you hope something's good, you want it to do well, because I have this vision in my head that it's going to fill something and it's going to create an impact. But what does that impact mean? Does that mean it's going to change the way we play games? Does that mean it's going to change the way we view first-person experiences? I don't think that many people have asked themselves that question internally. We hope that the game does well, but why? What for? What are the consequences if it fails? What are the consequences if it succeeds? If it fails, what message does that send to indie game developers in the future? If it fails, what does that say about exploratory first-person games with no narrative? If it succeeds, what are the opposite effects on it? So I think as we look at hope and as we look at hype even further, what happens once we get to the threshold and we walk past it?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting way to look at that. Looking at No Man's Sky, there are, like you said, there could be benefits, there could be pros and cons, even if it's successful. I think that one of the cons that you can look at maybe is that Sony says, hey, this game did really good. This is a good partnership. We want to own you now. We'll buy you, and you're going to into this bigger studio, which is not something that they necessarily do, right? They've in the past 4 years, they've definitely have this line of respect for indie devs and their kind of freedom. But if they were to do that, let's say we were in a scenario where they were, then maybe their games would just be really ambitious, or their games would definitely become more of a wild card, and a lot of the games would become really hyped. So the next game that comes out from Hello Games, that's the name, Hello Games, I think people would not be hopeful that they'll be hyped. They'll be hyped for it because it's a quantifiable. It's not necessarily a quantifiable thing, right? Especially if it's a complete different experience. And I think that a lot of that would fall flat on the floor. Of course, there is the concern if it does do well. What if Sony has them doing just more? What if they say, hey, I know you said nobody can actually finish this game, but we're going to do the Destiny thing, where it's going to last 10 years, but we actually release the second game in 2 years, and you're just going to keep releasing No Man's Sky games for the rest of your fucking career. And I don't think that's what they want to do, right? So that can also be a concern if the game is successful. Look at Telltale. I think Telltale is a good example. They're not necessarily an indie studio, but they're not owned by anyone, right? They just have high-profile IPs. So as soon as The Walking Dead became a success, which, again, I liked the first 2 episodes, but I could not play it for the life of me because I just didn't find a lot of the characters interesting. Now they have so many games and so many IPs on their panel. They have Game of Thrones, for God's sake. They have Batman. And they have all of this stuff now, and it's like they're never. I feel like they're never going to be able to do original games, and their success has taken them to a point where they're just trying to get as many properties as possible, and not even and while trying to do so many things, they're not trying to fix their fucking engine. It doesn't work. I like Wolf Among Us, the Wolf Among Us, but the game is just it's so bad. In terms of how it works, there is no structure there. People complain about the games. They should go play Telltale games. Pretty terrible. Also, they release them on every goddamn platform, and your microwave if it had a fucking screen on it. They would release it on your microwave if that was possible.
Now, I haven't actually played Telltale games, but from a bystander's perspective, I'm not at all interested, nor am I a fan of that medium, of what they're doing. And I think also because of the engine, things I've heard, but just looking at it and seeing it, I mean, I'm already not a fan of The Walking Dead and zombies, and I'm already off on that. But looking at some of the narrative stuff, it just doesn't sit well with me. To be honest, that would be an amazing segue for my mother, because she fucking loves The Walking Dead, and she loves reading. She's been a librarian for 32 years, so that has to tell you something. And if I put her in front of that game, she'd probably play it, and she'd probably really like it. It would probably put her through a washing machine of emotions, but I think she would really enjoy it, and it would allow her to play a game in a way that, if I put No Man's Sky in front of her, or GTA or whatever else, it doesn't matter, anything else, it would be very difficult for her to play, simply just because she's not familiar with how to play games in general. But that would allow someone like her to get into that.
Yeah, I agree with you. Ever since Telltale became a success, all those years back with the first season of Walking Dead, it's become this thing now that people say, I play this with my significant other because he or she doesn't play games, but they love to sit down with me and make decisions about the characters, and it's like a TV show for them, just an interactive one. And I can respect that, right? And again, coming, kind of reeling back into the pros and cons of it, of whether No Man's Sky will succeed. With Telltale, it succeeded. The first season of The Walking Dead was good. Like, it was good. Like, that's the only season, I think, of video games that has a very high rating, because it was the only team last at the time, right? So they put the development into full throttle for that game. And I will say that the opening episode, the pilot, is great. Like, if it was a standalone thing, it kind of wouldn't make sense. But if it was standalone, I would say, yeah, that was a really great experience, because it connects you with the character. You make decisions, and you have to make them sometimes on the fly, and are dire. Like, the decisions you make will bring either great things or dire consequences. And I see that since they continued to do that after the success, it became muddied, and they decided to do the same thing with that narrative structure. Use that narrative structure for every game without trying to amplify it or modify it, or make it more interesting. So they're basically doing the same thing over and over and over again, just in different worlds with different characters. And as much as I like The Wolf Among Us, I could probably compare it in a lot of ways to The Walking Dead. And that is the con for their success. And I think that with Hello Games, that's totally possible too. I look at, if anything, we're looking at indie devs that have very successful games. The ones I like to go to when it comes to, I guess, this kind of conversation, are the guys who did it right. And those are that's Supergiant Games, with Bastion, and then Transistor, and now Pyre that's coming out. All three completely different from each other. And although Bastion is considered like this indie darling, and I really like Transistor. People kind of had mixed feelings about it. They don't use the exact same kind of structure for each game, and the new one has a kind of like a sports feel to it, with a narrative, and it's really interesting. I think that's how you do that right, and that's really actually during E3, during giant E3 after shows in the evenings, they had Greg Kasavin on, who is the founder and I think the creative director at Supergiant, and Jeff Gerstmann asked him, like, hey, so you've had some great games, you had Bastion, Transistor. How, do you guys ever consider going back and making sequels to those games? And he's like, no, that's never on the table. We want to just continue making different kind of experiences, no matter how successful. Something along those lines. I'm not exactly quoting him. No matter how successful the previous game is, we want to move on to do something different. And that's incredible, because I think that while a lot of studios, especially indie studios, who they're like anything, 50-50. They don't even know if they're going to make it next month in terms of their paychecks, right? Or keeping the studio open. I would imagine that most they find success, or a lot of success, they would probably want to continue that steady flow in that routine of making the same kind of game, just keep life. What happens to the creativity there, right? And I think that Supergiant is a perfect example of how to do it correctly. While Telltale, people love Telltale. I like what they did. I like the ideas that they had, but the games are the same. So there are pros and cons to this, and Hello Games is probably in that position, right? That really delicate position of well, if the game does well, what really happens after this? You get a pat on the back. Sony will love you. People will love the game. People will know your studio. You'll probably be rewarded handsomely for your work. But what comes after? Do you move on to do something else? Do you have that wild card idea, or do you just continue comfortably into this kind of ignorant bliss of we're doing really creative stuff, but it's really the same thing we've been doing for the past 3 years? So I think that's definitely a difficult kind of thing. Of course, they could definitely do what Supergiant Games did. They could say, hey, we made No Man's Sky. Everyone liked it. Thank you. We're glad it's a great experience. We're glad you people are actually liking it. Now we're gonna fucking move on and do something else without the influence and the how much money we're gonna make on the next game. Because basically, if this game does well, it's gonna make enough money, hopefully, to fund their next game, whatever that is. And I think that it's important for indie devs to continue to be ambitious without having to worry about. Well, yes, you're still gonna worry about the crutch of will it succeed or will it fail. But I think that continued success is actually kind of, like I said, you become comfortable with it. I think that in the AAA where failure is not an option, right? Because failure literally closes studios down. In the indie scene, that can definitely happen probably a lot faster than it does in the AAA scene. But in the indie scene, failure is probably a good thing, right? Because then you can reassess what you're doing. And in fact, a good example of that recently is Tacoma, from the guys that made Gone Home, Fulbright. So what I didn't know is that they actually they had Steve Gaynor on the Giant Bomb thing. That's what you should. It was a really great interview. And they basically had come out and said that the reason why they delayed the game is not because of simple little things. They restructured the game. It's a completely different game now, apparently. And he very, very, frankly said to Jeff Gerstmann, who was interviewing him, like, yeah, we came to the conclusion that we were basically making Gone Home in space, and that wasn't what we wanted to do. So we started from scratch all over again. The space station still exists, right? But the content and the narrative inside of it is going to be completely different. And I think that's a hard thing to do for a lot of people and a lot of studios, right, to restart. But I think that's a sign of failure, right? That we fail to convey our message and our creativity, so we're going to start again. And in their case, they were really smart about this because they're doing this before the game comes out, right? I think that failure is a good thing, especially in the indie. Well, in the indie space, that's probably more prevalent, but failure, I think, is still important in the AAA space because it makes them have to reconsider how they do the second game if there's going to be a second game in that whatever series, right? So, looking at Watch Dogs again, Watch Dogs 1 was, a lot of people think it's very mediocre. I think it's extremely mediocre. It doesn't live up to its potential at all. And I would hope that maybe Ubisoft will learn from their mistakes. But we talked about the quantifiable, right? Ubisoft is not a wild card. We know what to expect from their games because we've been let down by their stuff before.
Right. Right. But so if AAA developers can let you down and learn from their mistakes and come back, does somebody like Hello Games, are they able to do that? If they're able to, are they able to fail with No Man's Sky and come back with something else?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I would say yes, but people give Ubisoft so many chances, right? I've given Ubisoft so many chances. I guess the question is, you have to ask yourself, would you give them another chance? I would say yeah. I would say yes. I think that they would deserve another chance, right? But I guess in the end, Ubisoft can have the excuses of funding, or we don't know how to animate women, some bullshit like that, right? What does Hello Games say? Funding, time, not the right staff.
I think less about that and more about what they're promising to deliver, because it's so ambiguous. It's so vague what No Man's Sky actually is. I think that is what I think I'm trying to get at, is what they're selling to us versus the next time if they fail from this. If they can even come back from a failure.
I think realistically, Hello Games, they have I think that it's very probable that they could just turn to dust and we'd never hear from them again. That's very possible. If it were up to Sony and the PlayStation division, they would probably see to that didn't happen. But I think that maybe not. I think that the game is just so ambitious in what it's trying to achieve that people would just kind of dismiss them. Just like I dismiss Ubisoft nowadays. But people would dismiss them more than Ubisoft because people still I complain about it, but I still play some Ubisoft games. People will still play Ubisoft. Will they play Sean Murray's game? I don't know. After this, if it doesn't do well, I don't think so. No, I don't think so. Unfortunately, sounds very crass, but that's how I feel about it.
No, I think that makes sense, because if it's just exploring worlds and the creatures that are in them, what do you do after that?
Yeah, and that's kind of the question we've been asking ourselves the past 2 years. What more is there to do? And like you said, it's very vague
and I wouldn't. Discreet. And I wouldn't say that to a detriment. I'm actually the kind of person who's okay with doing that for a few hours.
Yeah.
But I don't know in the general market and just being successful in selling and making money. I don't know how successful that is.
No, I mean, I don't know either. Like, the game does, like, if it's that kind of minimal experience that we've seen, like, in the gameplay, I like that kind of stuff, right? But how long will I play it? I don't know. I don't know. People dunk a ton of time into. People probably have legitimate, like, months and years into Minecraft at this point, right? And Minecraft, while looking very minimal, it in terms of its mechanics and the things you can do, it does have some depth to it, I would argue. But if this is literally just a game of exploring, and not necessarily, you don't need combat, right? But what else, like you said, what else do you do? Like, if there was like this, like I talked about an economic kind of system, or if there was like this deep economic system, and like, what if there was like this, I don't know. There's so much they can do with it. Now, whether they do all the things that people want or not is, well, we'll have to wait and see until the end game. But I think that it's the saying, people should not, and going back to hype and hope, right? Like, people shouldn't think or dream about, I hope this game has this, I hope this game has that. Because we don't know. All we have to go by is what the little gameplay that they've shown us, and the very few things that you see that you can actually do in the game. Now, honestly, I would assume that what you've seen in the gameplay demos so far is basically the gist of it. Like, that's the majority of the things you're going to be doing.
It's going to be a tough question to answer, but we'll see this August 9th. Todd, I have to let you know something really quickly. You have roughly 4 minutes to provide an interesting introspective about what we have been talking about for the last 56 minutes. And I say 4 minutes because, secretly, I have been performing a test since the moment you got on this phone.
Oh, all right. What kind of test? Are you timing us?
Sort of. I'm not personally timing you. Audacity is personally timing you.
You're recording this? You're recording this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'll ask you afterwards how you got this to work, but okay.
So I went to shoot for an hour. You have roughly a few minutes left. Just like a little test or a pilot or whatever, but a little secret phone conversation. I think this was, looking at the notes that I was taking during the call, it was actually really succinct. We stayed on a very particular topic throughout the entire hour. It was all about Watch Dogs. It was all about hope versus hype, No Man's Sky, and a lot of the themes kind of tied into each other, but yeah.
So I guess this is how Benny and Capello feel when I start recording and then realize that I've been recording the entire time. Okay, that's how that feels. Well, yeah, we'll chat. I guess we're shooting for the hour. I will say it as well. We discussed what hope and hype really means, and whether Watch Dogs 2 has potential or not, which it probably doesn't, and that's unfortunate. And what is No Man's Sky? Right? And it's crazy that we've talked about this for an hour, and while we speculated and we have seen gameplay, we still don't actually know what this game is, and it's practically less than 2 months away from release. That is interesting.
And with that, we will close out with the very first and potentially last episode of Secret Phone Calls with Todd. Thank you, Todd. That was fantastic.
You're welcome, Marcus.